So hello, welcome to the high cost of poor data management. My name is Bernie Lee. I'm a product manager here at LabKey, and we're going to spend time today. I'm going to tell you some stories that come from our 20 years of institutional experience solving scientific data management problems for a very wide variety of research organizations. Personally, I was a bench scientist, mainly in the world of biochemistry and toxicology a little bit, for about 10 years, and have since, of course, become this product manager at LabKey. I've spent a lot of time hands-on with our clients, working to improve their data management practices. And I'm here today to share a little bit about what we've learned. So first off, this stuff matters fundamentally because data. There is no science without data. Whether you're writing that down on pieces of paper or using spreadsheets and files or documenting it in some other way, it doesn't happen without data. That's kind of the point. And poor data management practices very much lead to wasted time, wasted money, a failure to see insights, and a lot of other operational inefficiencies. And so today, we want to explore some of those hidden costs. We want to talk about common pitfalls, and we want to talk best practices. So I like to begin with the end in mind. And I like to define what the ideal state might be. And so here's kind of a generalized version. I've broken this up into some different roles at organizations that are performing some of these operations. So research scientist, whatever kind of in-lab operator you are or your people are, this is supposed to be kind of that general category. So as a research scientist, good data management practices involve having some centralized place to capture, analyze, and report on your, for example, antibody and assay data. Obviously, there's all kinds of different data that you might be working with. I have a recency bias towards biologics development. You want easy to use software, meaning that it doesn't add cognitive burden or time to your operations, that integrates into your existing operations and workflows well. You want it to be easy to visualize and compare your data. And you also want to be able to easily track your own work queue, and and be able to manage that flow smoothly. Going some number of levels up, scientific decision maker, whether this is like a director of discovery or process development or whatever it is that you might be working on. These aren't people that are necessarily at the bench every day. From their perspective, having a structured system that helps improve data quality, consistency, and scientific reproducibility is really, really, really important. You want collaboration tools to help you govern the work and the projects that are happening within your purview. You desperately need a solution that scales with pipeline growth, because, of course, if you and your teams are successful, then you're only going to get more work, and at larger scale. And then finally, having a clear, useful way of tracking project progress, having clear data and report accessibility so that you can make the decisions necessary to move a project forward. And the last level in general that we're talking about is some executive stakeholder level, senior vice president of research, C-level kinds of people. What they need is obviously going to be very different than what the bench scientist, research scientist needs. What those executive stakeholder level people need is a solution that enhances productivity without excess operational complexity, meaning it doesn't add a bunch of extra burden. It improves productivity. Visibility into that research project progress, and some of the data-driven insight. Sometimes that's going to actually be raw analyses, and other times it's more about the state of those projects. They also really need some kind of platform that scales with company growth, because as is often their want, the goal is growth. And then something that helps to accelerate deliverables. These are things like reports to clients. These are things like reports to investors and stakeholders. These are things like IND submissions for new drugs of the FDA. If it takes people a really, really long time to compile those things, everything is slowed down. So that's kind of an outline of an ideal. And now what I'd like to do is start talking about some of the key challenges that get in the way of those ideals. So early biotech companies and other small research organizations, most often what we see is dispersed data across files and individual systems, individual computers, file shares, things like that. There's a great difficulty in tracking samples and plates. People have their own individual systems. Some of them are documented and tracked, and other times it's just the memory of the scientist operating. Lost or inaccessible data, sometimes that's actually losing things, and other times it's just, poor labeling and an inability to ultimately reconcile what you see in front of you in terms of files and data with what you're looking for. Inability to generate reports and analyze results efficiently. When all of these things are in individual pieces here and there, having to spend a lot of time with one or multiple minds compiling this stuff, it's a lot of time. And then disconnected data sets, limiting insights. When you have to do all of that work in order to aggregate information, in order to ultimately make some decision or learn something about your process, it's just incredibly time-consuming and inefficient. So we like to make these webinars interactive. We like to learn from you as best we can. So we've put together a couple of polls, really, really simple questions. And the first one, which I would appreciate your input for, is what are the challenges that you struggle with the most? You should get a little prompt that says, please fill out this poll. It's just a curiosity, just wondering where everybody is currently. And once people fill this stuff out, I'll try to share the results. So in the meantime, we are going to move on to some of the real costs of this poor data management. As I've already said, it impacts time, it impacts your scientific success, as well as funding. And so let's break down some of the biggest costs. Operational inefficiencies, the hidden time sink. Okay, so this is hidden mostly because everyone operating in the sciences just kind of treats this as though it's part of life. It's just part of being a scientist or running a team of scientists or running a company of scientists. Some huge amount of time is spent looking at, wrangling, organizing, and compiling and sharing data. And it just doesn't need to be the case. We have scientists spending hours and hours searching for data instead of doing more useful work, planning their actual experiments, discussing and ultimately drawing important conclusions, running their instruments and performing the next set of operations. You can do a lot more of all of the good things if you spend less time on the bad. Manual data entry, version confusion, and other sorts of things that ultimately slow research down. And then bottlenecks produced when this stuff is spread out across different teams, ultimately forming silos. I have a series of examples on here that are real. Kind of doing a poll of some of our existing clients. A lot of scientists probably on average by our calculation are spending 15 to 25% of the time just managing, searching for, and reanalyzing data, which could be spent on discovery or whatever else that you're working on. Can you imagine a 15 to 25% efficiency boost in your labs? That's what we're talking about here. It's very, very significant. And the solution here is having an actual centralized and structured data system to reduce your time, reduce this time. Okay, so, oh wow, we're all across the board here. It looks like a huge majority, greater than 80% of people, their biggest challenges from this last poll were related to dispersed data across files and individual systems. And that is the norm that we see as well. Most people come to us and they're just in spreadsheet files kind of all over the place. The next highest ones were related to finding and compiling data, as well as inefficient report and analysis generation. That makes sense. I really think that follows from the first problem, that biggest problem, that dispersed data across files and systems. Very good. Thanks so much. All right. Scientific risk. Okay, so that last one was about time. This one's actually about the science. And this one is very real as well. Very often, this is the one that actually strums the heart chords of scientists when they really think about it, which is the risk of losing critical data. Now, I don't necessarily mean like your data is gone, somebody deleted your files, or shredded the paper that you had critical stuff written down on. I mean that you don't totally understand what you're seeing anymore, or the nomenclature that you have is distinct from something you've done in the past or that other people use, and ultimately what that leads to is things like non-reproducible results, because I don't actually know how to interpret what I had before, or it looks different, but I don't know why. Because all of the critical information, whether it's raw data or metadata about what you did, is spread out everywhere and no longer interpretable. That, of course, leads to things like wasted samples, materials, reagents, instrument time, as well as scientist time. And all of that ultimately leads to an inability to validate past findings, which is particularly dangerous if your goal, for instance, is to ultimately have some of these things go into preclinical and clinical trials. As an example, in most cases, it's not quite this extreme, but we know of a biotech company that lost approximately a month of work because of a researcher's laptop crashing, who had a ton of stuff stored locally, and it was just kind of gone. And the solution here, again, is a centralized, secure, and we recommend cloud accessible system that ensures that long-term data integrity. One additional quick story here, we have a different client who, unfortunately, this was now more than a year ago, suffered a cyber attack, and our system was not affected whatsoever. And what that meant was there was incredible tumult. People were locked out of systems, but no data whatsoever was lost from this company. So as soon as they dealt with the issues with their systems, they could simply go back into LabKey, and all of the data was present. All of the metadata around their experiments, all of their old existing analyses, and in fact, even the who's supposed to be doing what now, all of that stuff was just still sitting there happily. So major cyber attacks are not that common, or at least not commonly successful, but there's one more reason. Okay, and then there are financial costs. We talked about time, we talked about science, and we're talking about straight money. When you are slowed down by all of this stuff, you end up with delays in project milestones. Whether you're trying to get further investor funding, whether you're simply competing with another company to put out some best-in-class new molecule first, or whether it has to do with partnerships with other organizations, those things matter. Those can ultimately impact your bottom line. When you have a lot of unnecessary duplication of experiments, that of course also drives costs up for obvious reasons. And the more maybe insidious one is when you have poor data visibility, when it's harder to trust the aggregation of the data from across lots of scientists, there is risk of suboptimal decision making, which we don't want. And the example here that I have is this small biotech that had been working with with a particular partner and ultimately lost that partnership because they were just had consistently long turnaround times. And a big portion of that was inefficiency in compiling what they actually needed to report. So a well-structured system can enable much faster decision making and improve that investor and partnership confidence. All right, common pitfalls. We're going to keep this one short because nobody likes pitfalls. But why do so many people struggle with this? Well, I think it may be somewhat obvious from that original poll. A huge portion, a huge majority are using these dispersed systems, individual files, etc. But let's examine some of those common mistakes. So first off, we have that over-reliance on spreadsheets. That means there's no version control. Sometimes you can have conflicting data or conflicting nomenclature that produces confusion. And these are systems. I put systems in scare quotes, that are difficult to scale because they're just pure manual work in a file. We've had groups that had 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 plus spreadsheets that they work within, and there were inconsistencies in the way people were identifying samples, and therefore the data associated with one sample and data associated with yet maybe the same one, but they're not sure because it has a different ID, ultimately just means, okay, we got to redo this work. Fragmented sample and plate tracking. So if you have to do this stuff manually as well, you're going to inhibit your coordination. If you are a one-person show, fine, it's just you. But imagine as you scale up the number of scientists, the number of people involved that need to work with some of the same material. If you're trying to manually track this stuff and one person does something a little bit differently or forgets, you've got a problem. Non-integrated information. So you'll have information about your samples. You'll have information about what you put in plates. You'll have raw results. If those things are all in distinct places, same problem. And then, of course, there are things near and dear to my heart, like discovery campaigns, where you ultimately have these iterative operations, and their relationship is really important. And samples are not necessarily in exactly the same spot in every step. And if you're manually tracking a lot of this stuff, then those plate layouts and those sample locations over the iterative experiments are lost, and it becomes very difficult, or at least extremely time consuming, to figure out where the result that I got down here relates to the thing that I started with up there. Very challenging. Silos. I guess I mentioned silos before, but another client, which shall remain unnamed, came to us ultimately. This is a multinational biopharma that was struggling to compile their existing results into assays. Struggling to compile their results and analysis into scientific reports that were being requested by some of those director level and senior VP level people. And every time one of those requests would come down the pipe, this group would have to, kind of stop what they're doing, and everyone would have to go dig up the right data. They'd kind of put it together. They'd have to reconcile it. They'd have to reform it into a deliverable back up that chain. And we're talking about hours, days, way more than hours, days to like a week's worth of work just to recapitulate this work that they had already done. Those are big setbacks. It's not fun. When all those things are truly together, you don't have those silos, it's much more straightforward. Okay, let's talk about best practices since these are way more interesting. I've got one more poll for you here, again, just because we like to learn from you as we go. For best practices for scalable data management, trying to get beyond these spreadsheets and local storage, key principles, and how to do these connections. So what we want to know from you is, what are you currently using to support your data management? And obviously, if a lot of you are in files and spreadsheets, that's your answer. But I'm interested if there are other contributing tools. And while you're filling that out, let me tell you about one of our other clients, and I'm going to kind of put this up on a pedestal a little bit for you. So we have this group that we work with whose goal, sorry, they're a biotech organization that does a lot of discovery, development, and even manufacturing of biologics, things like antibodies. And they set this goal of saying, we want to be able to, in 75 days, go from the initiation of discovery into preclinical characterization. 75 days. For those of you that actually work in this space, you may understand how insanely fast that is. And they call it Operation Lightspeed for a reason. That is inconceivable unless you are finding ways of automatically capturing data, automatically performing analyses, automatically generating reports, and have some operational governance for the people that are involved. There's simply no other way. So looking at these poll results, and thank you very much for filling that in as well. It looks like almost everyone has some kind of ELN, but most people are either supplementing or still primarily using spreadsheets and files. We have a few groups with various homegrown systems, and a few groups that have purchased some kind of LIMS or similar product. So that makes sense when we all go through college and graduate school. We write everything down in our notebooks, and that totally makes sense. Okay, thank you very much for that. Let's talk about some of the best practices, centralizing data. So some of the benefits of these may be obvious at this point, but it ensures that all stakeholders, whether you're talking about bench scientists, those director level scientific decision makers, or executive stakeholder level people, have access to the same up-to-date data. People are all on the same page. It'll dramatically reduce the time wasted searching for this information or compiling it, like in that example that I shared before, and creates a reliable historical record of experiments with backups. Now, that reliable historical record, typically integrated with, across all the different types of data that you have, is extremely valuable in a variety of circumstances. So one of them is the example that I have listed below here, which is that when you want to go and actually submit an investigational new drug application to the FDA, your retrieval and compilation time can be at least weeks, maybe longer. But if it's all in one place, kind of structured and pre-integrated for you, we're talking about hours instead. There are other groups that we support that have instrument data, sophisticated instruments, mass spectrometers, flow cytometers, things like that, expensive machines where their system suitability, quality control, things like that, all of that stuff through time really matters, and the way that relates to the actual data captured and your ability to troubleshoot or ultimately look back at data that you generated hours, days, weeks, months ago and say, here's an observation we have of our results that has manifested in some report that we've been examining. Did something weird happen? Your ability to do that quickly is contingent upon having this data in one place and integrated. Okay, for that Operation Lightspeed thing, I talked about how ideally a lot of this stuff is automated. Fundamentally here, I'm talking about removing the human element to some significant degree from some of these steps. So if you set up your experiment, you do your sample prep, you put materials on some instrument, and out comes your results. If that can just go straight into whatever the data management system is, and so that's automatic capture, and upon import, it generates some statistics, gives you some plot that you need, and produces in one screen some place that has the report that you need in order to share that with someone or make some decision. Then you've dramatically reduced the time required, the cognitive load on the human, and the likelihood of any kind of error, since we are error-prone creatures. That, of course, also improves reproducibility and auditability. Talked about that auditability when it came to like instrument system suitability kind of things, but also reproducibility, because you've removed that likelihood of human error. If the human can just do the same thing, and the process that everything goes through after the fact is automated, then it's going to be the same. You're going to be able to reproduce your work much more easily. And of course, if that is the way that it works, then it's much easier to make decisions within the same system quickly. So we worked with one group that after implementation, they roughly doubled the number of discovery campaigns that they could do at one time, because they could focus much more on the actual lab operations instead of working 15, 20, 25% of their time on the data management stuff. So some fairly, by the way, that wasn't a group that was running like 100 campaigns at once. That was a few campaigns at once, and they could increase it. Okay, and then enhancing searchability and reporting. Quick retrieval of past experimental data. Talked about this a couple of times. Easy report generation for internal decision making and external stakeholders. So this is where instead of having to take all of your data out, put it in particular forms, produce a PowerPoint, and then like email a PowerPoint to somebody, you give them a link, the URL to where this data sits with your chart and statistics, and you say like, these are our best candidates. We should move forward with these, and they just click on it and they look at it and they're like, yep, sure is. And then consistency across projects for future utility. So this one is probably worthy of its own webinar, but just as a quick example here, if you have a structured system like this in one place, and you want to use that data later for something, for example, there are all kinds of increasingly popular machine learning and artificial intelligence applications for improving the predictability of improving prediction of the developability of some large molecule. That only works if you can go grab all of the data from all of the different processes that you've done and said, like, what are the common traits of successful molecules that we've discovered. And these sorts of systems support that kind of stuff, whereas dispersed systems and unstructured systems do not. And even if you don't currently do something like this, and it doesn't have to be something fancy, some fancy machine learning thing, if you ever want to be able to go back and make use of that data for anything, if you think maybe you're going to make an investment in something like a team of data scientists to help you with some of those bigger projects, you're going to want to start capturing and structuring your data now. Otherwise, you're going to have to do twice as much work later to clean it all up. And so, similar example here, Biotech cut down its report generation time from 2 days to 2 hours with these improved search and reporting tools. Okay. Couple of quick key takeaways, and then I'm going to have one shameless plug here. So poor data management leads to lost time, increased costs, scientific risk, all very real, very tangible. Spreadsheets and standalone systems can create inefficiencies and errors. A centralized, connected, and automated system can improve your research outcomes as well as efficiency and monetary outcomes. And investing in some kind of scalable data management system will save you a lot of money and accelerate your discovery. So better data management today means faster and less expensive discoveries tomorrow. So one quick plug. At LabKey, we have a variety of products for a variety of scientific endeavors. I'm the product manager for our biologics limbs, which is why I've been largely talking about antibody discovery and development stuff. We would love to talk to you about your data management approach, your data management problems and pitfalls, and would be delighted to show you some of our products and talk to you about how we solve a lot of the same kind of problems you're having for others. My product of biologic limbs is really great for things like antibody discovery and development workflows. Really helps you track samples, plates, molecules, sequences, constructs, vectors, all that kind of stuff, and provides that centralized and structured data system for better insights and faster decision making. So please, I think we'll send you a link to look around at a tour of some of our products and an easy way to get in touch with us if you want to have a conversation. And with that, I thank you very much for coming and hanging out with us. If there are any questions, I'd be delighted to take them. We have a Q&A feature at the, it should be the bottom of the Zoom window that you're looking at. And if you have any of those to ask, I'd be delighted to take some. And if you feel like simply digesting what I've shared today and coming back for a conversation, I'd love to talk about it with you then. Thanks so much. Oh, goody, we got one question. Thanks so much to whoever sent that. A lot of the reason why we haven't moved to a system is because it's a lot of activation energy. Can you comment on that? Yes. Well, it is. There's fundamentally no question about that. When you're making some significant change from current practice to something that is foreign, that's just a fact. My fundamental argument to you with this presentation is that over the long run, it is more expensive in every way to not have a system than it is to have one. And so, the timing of implementing something like this is, definitely matters. There can definitely be a wrong time to make the investment to change over to some kind of system. But, fundamentally, in terms of money, time, and scientific data quality and reproducibility, it the cost of having one of these systems, of implementing one of these systems, is lower than the cost of not. So the way that we typically operate and help people implement is that we find we assess the system and help figure out how it's going to make sense to model a lot of this stuff. And then we choose bite-sized pieces, usually the highest value, things to help implement first. And we can do a stepwise implementation that hopefully minimizes the amount of churn, pain from that change management. Any other questions? Again, I'm delighted to have a conversation about this with you in particular. Please get in touch with us and we'll have some further conversations. Okay. Thanks so much for attending. We'll look forward to hearing from some of you.